Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And These Are Your Stories. So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
Today's 5-minute mystery is a rescue job. We've never had this particular one before because I thought it was unsalvageable. I spent some time on it and was able to restore it. I did, however, have to recreate part of it.
Was it worth it?
Probably not, but here we go. Listen, my dear Miss Egan, I have taken your actions for long enough. I took a gamble with you and Robert, and this is what I've seen. I think it's time for a change. Well, hello. What are you doing up at this hour? That gun. What are you going to do with that? Put it down. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Don't. Oh, the scorpion. The scorpion.
That's how my brother died, Inspector. I see. I thought when I found this record on his dictaphone that it might contain some clue as to his murder. It doesn't tell us a thing.
Don't be so sure, Mr. Spencer.
What do you mean?
Well, your brother mentioned the word scorpion. That might mean something.
I hope so.
By the way, Mr. Spencer, what was your brother dictating when he was killed?
He was finishing up his new play.
I see. Well, I guess I've seen enough in here.
Would you like to meet the others?
Yes, I would.
They're in the library. Right through this door, Inspector. Boys, I want you to meet Inspector Harris. Inspector, this is Roger DeHaven.
How do you do,
Inspector? This is Professor Marco.
How do you do, Inspector?
Professor?
Well, I'm not the real professor. That is just my professional name. You see, I'm an astrologer. I tell fortunes by the stars.
Why are you all here?
You see, Inspector, Professor Marco, Roger DeHaven, my brother, and I are all members of the same club.
And it so happens that all of us have birthdays in the same week, so each year we all come up here and celebrate.
Does the word scorpion mean anything to any of you?
Scorpion? No, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Why do you ask, Inspector?
Well, you see, before Spencer died, he was dictating a scene for his new play over the dictaphone. He was interrupted when someone came in and shot him. With his dying breath, he repeated the word scorpion several times.
Say, Inspector, isn't the scorpion a sign of death?
Yes, but I don't think he meant that. No, I think he was trying to give us a clue as to the identity of his murderer. Of course. Why didn't I think of it before?
What do you mean, Inspector?
I know what your brother was trying to say when he referred to the scorpion.
You do?
Yes. And I'm arresting you, Professor Marco, for the murder of Howard Spencer.
How does the inspector know that Professor Marco is the murderer? We'll give you the solution in just a moment, but first...
Pretty good story when it was all said and done. That is why I restored it.
I heard the original recording. Pretty sad shape.
Yep. So, do you know why the detective thinks the professor did it?
Yes, but I don't understand why when these people are getting shot, stabbed, thrown off a cliff, or poisoned, they don't just say the name of the killer.
Well, then it wouldn't be a mystery?
Good point.
And now, back to our story.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Marco has confessed to his crime. Spencer's reference to a scorpion puzzled me for a while. But then I realized that a scorpion is also a sign of the zodiac. But that didn't mean anything either, since it refers to people born in November, and all the people concerned in this case had their birthdays this week. Then I concluded that Spencer was referring to the zodiac as a whole. And was there anyone in this case who could be associated with the zodiac? Yes, Professor Marco, the astrologer, who tells fortunes by the stars.
Well, that was definitely a roundabout way to get there.
Yes, if only the victim had said, "Professor, don't shoot."
You're stuck on that, aren't you?
I am.
Well, if it helps, at least this story made some sense.
That is a small comfort for a story lost in mysticism.
And with that, I leave you to your trauma dissipation.
I don't believe that is a word.
You are correct.
Is that you said?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we have a lot to get to. In fact, there's 8 segments in the show, and we don't do that very often. We have 3 brand new ghost stories from you guys that include a visit from Grandpa and 2 shadow creature tales. Then we have a brand new segment called How Do I Do That? Our featured story comes from the OTR series, Challenge of the Yukon, and then we will end the show with a Phillip K. Dick sci-fi story titled The Eyes Have It.
That's so much stuff.
Yes, it is. We have an email to read this week. It comes from Han Cook, 909, with 00. It goes something like this. Hey Ron, I've been binge listening to your show and have to say I'm impressed. However, I do have a question. Do you think you're being punked with These Are Your Stories? Some of them are too incredible to be believed. Well, Hancock, you're right. They are amazing and at times hard to believe. I guess I look at it like this. I don't believe that I'm being punked. Do I believe them all? No. However, there are those stories that have a ring to them that I do think are real. Also, some are more credible than others. For example, I've had tales with dates, places, and times. This leaves me the opportunity to do some research, and I have to say, 9 times out of 10, these types of stories have backing proof. I remember one story we had from the Adolphus Hotel in Texas. The person left names, room numbers, floors, and I even found claims from other people who had stayed in the hotel that had the same types of experiences. That is very hard to discount. I'm sure that I've been punked, but I've always said that there is a kernel of truth in every story. They all come from somewhere or some experience that triggers them. That is just a fact. Do I print or read every story that I get? That would be a no. Some stories are just plain inappropriate or so poorly written, I can't make heads or tails of them. For the most part, I enjoy every story I get and do my best to get them on the show. If a person does get a story that isn't true, does it really matter? That is, if it's truly amazing. Thank you, Hancock, with 2 zeros, for sending in this question. I absolutely love it. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Audible has sponsored the show now since July of 2019. We have reviewed more than 140 audiobooks, and the list keeps growing. Did you know that Audible has over 200,000 books available? And a lot of those are included in the free catalog. Audible is amazing, and it is the perfect companion to Ron's Amazing Stories. If you like this podcast, you're going to love Audible. So what am I listening to? Somebody Saved Me by Pete Townsend. The Who played in my hometown on October 13th, 1976. How do I know this? I still have the ticket stub. There were about 10,000 Hard Rock fans in the Memorial Coliseum that day, plus one awestruck teenager. It was the first concert I'd ever seen and one of the best I've ever seen. Keith Moon and John Entwistle were both still with us, and the movie Tommy had just been released. I remember sitting there thinking that it can't get any better than this. They opened the show with the overture to Tommy, and things just got better from there. It truly was amazing. One of the things that I've never admitted before was that I didn't actually have my parents' permission to be there that day. Also, to this day, I have never told them. My father has passed, but Mom, hey, I'm really sorry I lied to you. I was not at John's birthday party. However, it was his birthday. Pete Townshend is one of the great figures in rock and roll history. For almost 60 years, The Who have balanced the physical and the spiritual with introspective lyrics and inspirational music. But there is one part of Townshend's story and The Who's that has not been examined. In this Audible original, Pete Townshend's Somebody Saved Me, the songwriter takes us through the period 1978 and 2002. During these 24 years, The Who enjoyed their greatest popularity. Here is a short clip from Peter himself from the very beginning of the book.
Hi, I'm Pete Townshend, and these are my words, a music, an Audible original. I've had a long career with The Who, and it's been well documented, as a solo artist and with The Who band, by me and by others. And here I want to talk about the period after my generation and I Can See for Miles, after Tommy and Won't Get Fooled Again. The time, more or less, between the death of Keith Moon in 1978 and the death of John Entwistle in 2002. This is a time when The Who was at its most popular and when The Who broke up, a time when I made solo records and worked on projects of all kinds outside rock and roll. It was a time The Who suffered great loss and then came together again. You could say that in this Words and Music project, I'm going to focus on my middle ages.
No matter how much he tried to deny it, The Who had a hold on Pete he could not ignore. Every time he thought he was out of rock and roll, it pulled him right back in. Townshend is honest about his victories and his failures in the years that was spiked with conflict and resolution, the sacred and the profane, love and loss. Townshend punctuates his memories with songs that came out of his life during that time. For example, Let My Love Open the Door, Slit Skirts, You Better, You Bet, and many more. Like you've never heard them before. In Somebody Saved Me, Pete Townshend bears his soul, bears his teeth, and even bears his heart. Now, just in case you don't know, The Who are an English rock band formed in London in 1964. Their classic lineup consisted of lead singer Roger Daltrey, guitarist and singer Pete Townshend, bass guitarist and singer John Entwistle, and drummer Keith Moon. They are considered one of the most influential rock bands of the 20th century and have sold over 100 million records worldwide. Their contributions to rock music include the development of the Marshall stack, large PA system, the use of the synthesizer, Townshend's feedback and power chord techniques, and the development of the rock opera. The Who are cited as an influence by many hard rock, punk rock, and mod bands, and their songs, I don't even have to tell you this, are still being played today. This audiobook is sure to take you back, or if you're young, to show you how it really was back there when the music industry as a whole was the new Wild Wild West. Do you want to hear this for yourself? All you gotta do is head to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can have Somebody Saved Me by Pete Townshend for free. Here is what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This also gains you access to the included catalog, which is updated constantly with new titles. So to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Rock on, and thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
We start this week's stories with this one from Alicia Johnsel. Alicia was born in San Francisco but currently lives in Newcastle, Australia. She has titled her story, Grandpa, Is That You? Hello, Ron. Love the really big shoe. The variety keeps me coming back, but it's the listener stories that are the balm. I have thought about writing in for a long time, and I have decided that now is the time. I was listening to some of your past episodes while camping, and I came across a story about a lady and her non-alive grandpa coming to visit. I was shocked because, well, let me tell you my story. Before I start my story, I just want to say that my family did not experience this in person, but my neighbors did. My grandpa is from Vietnam, and he came to Australia for a holiday. He was only here for 2 weeks, and sadly, he died in our backyard. The doctors think it was because of a stroke. We obviously decided on a funeral here in Australia, but my mother still wanted to have one in Vietnam as well. A couple days later, we decided to go to Vietnam and bring his body home. That's when things got strange. We gave our neighbors the keys to the house, just in case, so they could look in on things. We were, after all, going to be gone for a few weeks. At first, things were fine, but then the light in my bedroom kept coming on at night. They called me and asked me if I had set it on some kind of timer. I had not, so they went in to investigate. While in the house, they heard some noises coming from the kitchen. They were startled to find an older Asian man sitting at the table. They asked him who he was and what he was doing there. He looked at them blankly and then just faded away. At that moment, they heard more sounds coming from the hallway. They ran there just in time to watch my bedroom light come on and then go off. They got out of the house and called us the next day. Each night while we were gone, that bedroom light came on and then off again. When we returned home, I went over to pick up the keys and heard the story again. I opened up my phone and showed them a picture of my grandpa. They exclaimed in unison, "That's the guy." After we had settled in, we decided to investigate their claims. But nothing happened or has happened since. I believe my friends and doubt very much that they made this story up. Alicia Johnsel, Newcastle, Australia. All I have to say is, why would they make it up? And what an interesting adventure. I tried to find the story that this reminded you of, but with the hundreds of stories that we've had over the years, I wasn't able to track it down. As for your grandpa, it sounds like he made it safely back to his resting place in Vietnam. Thank you, Alicia, for your story. Our next story comes from Reddit. It was brought to my attention by Austin Sherman Burke, who writes to us from Los Angeles. He has titled his story, "But I Saw It." When I was 10 years old, I was sleeping over at my friend's apartment in the same complex as mine. It was a late summer night when I suddenly woke up not feeling good for some reason, so I went over to the window to breathe in some fresh air. I was thinking it was probably a nightmare that I just couldn't remember, which was weird because I always do. Anyways, my friends were dead asleep in the same room as me, and I'm at the window. First, I look down at the top of the trees, then the sky. Then my eyes go down towards the street in front of me, and I see a man all dressed in black. I could see his red eyes staring up at me at our window. Staring at me. He wasn't moving a finger, he was just standing there looking at me. I wake up my friends telling them to come look down at the street, which they immediately did. They all looked back at me like I was crazy, saying they couldn't see anything and that there was no one down there. Mind you, at this point, I'm just crying and hysterically telling them, "He's right there. He's right in front of you. Look!" But they couldn't see him. They eventually went and woke up their older brother, who was 17 years old, so that he could come and try to calm me down, which he did. After a while, I went back to sleep. That's the end of it. I'm 25 years old now, and I still live in L.A., and I've never seen anything else like that. I'm not schizophrenic at all. I did have a shrink when I was 14 years old, but that was for social anxiety because we were moving so much. To this day, I'm quite confused about that night and what I really saw. Ron, I'm curious to know if anyone else has experienced something like this. Austin Sherman Burke, Los Angeles, California. Well, Austin, all I can say is that we have had many stories like this on the show in the past. However, none of them had a shadow that only they could see. That is a first for the show. Some say that the night can play tricks with the eye. However, I'm not sure that applies in this case because I'm guessing that there were streetlights in the area. I do know that people find that telling their stories can be quite cathartic. I hope that's the case for you. Our last story for this week comes from Janine Grant, who lives in Bradford, Texas. This is another Shadow Man story. We've had a real increase in these types of stories of late. Not sure what's going on. Shadows Everywhere is the title for this one. Hello, Ron. I've heard you talking about shadow creatures. I've had multiple paranormal experiences, but these types creep me out the most. I believe that I have a shadow person following me throughout my life. The first time I remember seeing it myself was when I was in my old bedroom upstairs, meaning not in the basement. I was 7 or 8 years old, and in the middle of the night I woke up and looked at my window, which had blinds and was illuminated by the moon. In front of the window was a black silhouette of a little girl with what looked like short, curly hair. Old-timey looking. I was terrified and thought I was seeing things, so I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. The bedroom door was open when I woke up. I asked my parents if they had come into the room, and they said they hadn't. A couple of months or so after I had seen it, I had a sleepover with my friend at the time, still in the same room. We had slept on the floor because my bed was too small for the both of us. In the middle of the night, my friend woke up and saw that there was a shadow man standing over me, just staring down at me, sleeping. She told me this when she woke up in the morning, and I noticed again my door had been opened. I just figured it was one of my parents checking on us, so I asked them if they came into the room, and again they both said no. Another night, years later, my parents were on vacation and everyone went somewhere, but I opted to stay home. The first night out, I was making dinner when I saw a flash of darkness move across the room. It stops right in front of me, and I feel chills go through my body. I don't remember what happened next or what happened to the creature, which is a whole new level of scary. Years later, I moved into my sister's room downstairs in the basement after she had moved out. I was 16 or 17 and had kind of forgotten about the shadow person at this point. My best friend spent the night and she had told me in the morning that she had seen a shadow figure in the center of the room, standing over me, looking down. I should point out that I had told neither of my friends about my shadow stories until they told me that they had seen it. I'm 19 years old now and I still have periodic encounters with these creatures. The latest while I was at a movie theater, but that is a story for another time. Janine Grant, Bradford, Texas. Well, Janine, at the very least, you have something strange going on in your home. And for the record, I have got to hear that shadow tale at the movies. Send that one in too, won't you? Thank you for sharing your stories. Well, that's it for this time. If you have a story that you want to share, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com. Then click on the story submission banner, leave your story, give it a title, and tell me where you're from. I'll read it if I can. Well, we're presenting a brand new segment today that I'm going to call How Did I Do That? This may be the only installment of this one, but hey, if you like it, let me know. Perhaps we'll do more of them. This was spurred by an email I received from Andrew Schmidt, who didn't say where he was from. Here is his email, and I do have to apologize to Andy. I've held on to this one for quite a while until I had an example to answer the question. Hey Ron, you sound really good, but I have to ask, some of your OTR material that you play sounds so much better than it does on the Internet Archive, especially the 5-minute mysteries. How do you do that? Andy. Funny you should ask, Andy. This week's 5-minute mystery is one that I thought I could never use because it was in such poor shape. Keep in mind that these stories were created in the mid-1940s and that recording equipment was in its infancy. Basically, they were stored on huge records called transcription discs. You could still buy these on eBay for around $50 to $500, depending upon the content. These records, of course, get scratched up, and the result is just about what you would think. Now, here is a bit of today's 5-minute mystery before I cleaned it up.
Another 5-minute mystery.
Now, let's listen to it after I worked some audio magic on it.
Another 5-minute mystery.
How did I do that? Well, it does take a bit of trial and error to get it done and sound okay. I realize that it's not perfect, but the before and after changes are pretty dramatic. The first step is to get rid of the hum and record scratches. That is achieved by using a noise reduction plugin. It allows you to sample what you want removed, and then using decibel sensitivity and frequency smoothing, you can remove the unwanted noise. The next step is to use a graphic equalizer with as many bands as possible. I use Apple's AU Graphic EQ, which allows me to adjust up to 31 bands. Basically, I start flat, cut the bottom and top frequencies, and then just play with what is left until it sounds okay. This will, on these old recordings, cause it to sound a bit muffled. However, the alternative is ear-shattering. This particular 5-minute mystery had another challenge. Part of the story was totally unusable. Listen to this and you'll see what I mean.
Listen, my dear Cecilia, I've stopped your nonsense long enough. Don't you think I've noticed you and Robert? Well, I have noticed. I've seen. I think it's about time for change, a drastic change, but... Hello, what are you doing up this hour?
There was no saving that, so what I did was recreate the segment. I tried as best as I could to figure out what the heck he was saying, and then I played with it again using EQ until it sounded kind of like an old recording. Here is the result.
Listen, my dear Miss Egan, I have taken your actions for long enough. I took a gamble with you and Robert, and this is what I've seen. I think it's time for a change. Well, hello. What are you doing up at this hour?
Now, I admit that was not my best acting job, and I probably could have done a bit better with the sound. But hey, I was able to restore a pretty badly damaged recording. I hope you agree. Well, that's it for this question. I want to thank Andrew for it. If you want to know about how I do things, drop me a note and ask your question. Maybe we'll do this again someday. Our featured story for today comes from the classic radio series Challenge of the Yukon. This story is one of murder and the mighty husky, King. The story is titled King Spots a Murder, and it first aired on November 25th, 1943.
The Challenge of the Yukon. On King, on you huskies! King, the swiftest, strongest of Eskimo lead dogs, blazes the trail through storm and snow for Sergeant Preston as he meets the Challenge of the Yukon. Sergeant Preston was typical of the small band of Northwest Mounted Police who preserved law and order in the Yukon during the gold rush of '98. That was the year that brought over 50,000 men swarming into the Klondike region, and the greed for gold led to frequent violence and bloodshed. But in spite of the odds against them, the force preserved a splendid record in preserving the right. The challenge of the North was answered, and justice ruled triumphant. Sergeant Preston was breaking camp early one morning, the icy cold of the north chilling his face. Suddenly, as he turned from the fire, he noticed King. The dog seemed to be listening intently, his nose in the air, every muscle momentarily tense. In spite of himself, the Mountie stood still, but the quiet of the Yukon seemed to him unbroken. It was then that King, a strange, savage growl in his throat, ran from the Mountie toward a line of pine trees.
King! Well, he heard something, I'm sure of it. But what? Well, there's only one way to find out. Go after him. He stopped ahead there. What is it, fella? What's wrong? I don't see... Well, so that's it. Yeah. Looks like you chased someone out of here, King. Yes. Whoever it was, he's almost out of sight. But why? Why would King standing over by the campfire, but... That man's retracing his tracks. He came up to here and then stopped. Then walked over and stood here. He could see perfectly from here. And he must have been watching us when King sensed something wrong. King, old fella, I don't know what I'd do without you. But this is one time I'm stopped. He got away without me hearing him. Guess your barks covered any noises he made. I couldn't even get a look at him. Why would anyone come up here, stand, and watch us? Was he intending to head back for Fort Munn? Or did you make up his mind for him, Well, since we're heading in his direction, maybe we'll just keep to those tracks.
Returning to his campsite, Sergeant Preston scattered the fire, preparing to follow the mysterious traveler who had aroused King. Once on the trail, the great dog covered distance quickly, keeping to the tracks cut clearly in the snow. But as they approached Fort Munn, the Mountie found that other tracks obscured those made by the stranger, and it was more and more difficult to separate one from another, till he was forced to admit the hopelessness of pursuing the man further.
It's not wrong for anyone to ride so far on a trail and then change his mind. Certainly there's no ground for suspicion there. Oh, King. Oh, you huskies. Oh. Well, there's one thing you're sure of in Fort Munn. This cafe opens the first thing in the morning, and it's the last building to be darkened at night. Well, King, we're bound to find some news in here.
Sergeant Preston!
Oliver, hello there. How are you?
Mighty glad to see you. That's what I am.
Oh, no, that's what I call a real welcome. What's wrong? You look like you've lost your claim or something.
It'd be truer if you'd say I look like I lost my best friend.
Your best friend?
Sergeant, when I found Mike dead yesterday, I prayed that you'd come to Fort Munn.
Mike?
They shot him in the back, dirty yellow skunks. He didn't have a chance. It was snowing when I found him. No tracks that I could make out.
Oh. He was murdered.
Yeah. If I knew who did it, I'd... Well, back where I come from, we have a name for men that shoot from ambush.
Where'd you find him?
Out near those two big rocks west of here.
Oh, yes, I know the place.
He never did anybody any harm, Sergeant.
Oh, no, Oliver, wait a minute. Let's go over this slowly. Now, you say you found him?
Yes. Yes, I found him.
What reason would anyone have for killing Mike? Unless...
Somebody could have killed him for his gold. That's what everybody here in town thinks.
And you?
Well, I guess that must be it. Fred Johnson said Mike drew out every bit of the dust he had in the bank. You can't argue with a banker.
You mean you'd have an argument to give Fred about that?
Oh, it's not that. But you see, Mike never came to town without stopping to see me.
Yes, I know.
According to Fred, Mike drew out his dust and then headed back toward his claim. If I didn't know he went to the bank, I'd say he was shot on his way into town.
I see.
But I don't know. I'm just glad you're here, Sergeant, because I want to see the man that murdered Mike hang. And the sooner he does, the easier I'll rest.
I can't promise you how soon he'll be brought to justice. But he will be. You didn't find any of the dust on him?
Not a trace of it. Even the poke he carried with him was gone. Oh, here I'm keeping you out in the cold. I guess you're going into the cafe.
Well, I thought I'd find some news by going in and talking to the boys. But we've had enough news for a while. King?
Hey, that's funny. Look at King. He's watching Fred and that man with him.
You don't know who he is?
No.
Well, Sergeant Preston. Hey, what's that monkey yapping for?
Quiet, King. Quiet, boy. Yeah, that's better, boy. How are you, Fred?
Fine. Hello, Oliver. Fred. Going inside?
Why, yes, we're going in. How about it, Oliver?
Well, I'm sure not going in to celebrate anything.
Yeah, still feel pretty bad about Mike Oliver, huh? I don't blame you. We all do. Oh, excuse me a minute. I see Joe Higgins over there. I want to talk to him.
Sure, go ahead, Fred.
I wondered if he'd introduce his friend.
Friend? Maybe he thought you knew him.
Well, hardly. If I did, I'd have spoken to him. No, I don't know him. But King here does.
Sergeant Preston watched the two men make their way through the room. His face was thoughtful as he noticed the banker speak for a moment to Joe Higgins at the far end of the bar. Then the two walked to a table in the corner. The man looked over his shoulder quickly as if to make sure no one was listening before he spoke.
That's the one. I told you I saw him, Mountie.
You told me you were ready to drop him when that dog started for you.
That dog. I should have dropped him.
Why didn't you?
Because when that mutt started coming at me, that policeman was right behind him with a gun in his hand.
You could have stopped them both.
Not the way that dog was coming, I couldn't. I came back here to warn you.
Warn me? Listen, we're in the clear.
Yeah. But that Mountie was talking to the friend of the prospectors.
What difference does that make? Oliver doesn't suspect a thing. You're new here. You just came in from the States, see?
Just so long as you don't say where in the States.
You're safe here.
I got my fill of looking out from behind bars, Johnson. So you better handle this right.
If you keep your mouth shut and don't run from every loose lead dog in the Yukon, we won't have anything to worry about.
I ain't running from any dog. But Preston's one Mountie I don't aim to cross.
Preston's like all the rest of them. If you're smart, you'll stay with me and you'll clean up enough to leave this country a rich man.
I always wondered how bankers got their money.
It's an easier way to get gold than digging for it.
Though he talked to Oliver, Sergeant Preston watched the two men at the far end of the room closely.
King here looks like he's waiting for something.
He's just given me an idea, Oliver.
How can a dog...
King and I work together. He's been right every time he's ever started after something.
Well, they do say a dog's got a sixth sense.
Well, I don't know whether it's a sixth sense or not, but if that's what they call it, I won't disagree.
Where are you going?
I just want to talk to Fred.
Oh.
We thought we'd join you, Fred.
Sure. Pull up a chair.
Here, I'll take that one, Sergeant.
You're a stranger in Fort Munn, aren't you?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. You and the sergeant don't know each other, Slim. Sergeant, this is Slim West. Slim, Sergeant Preston.
Hi.
How do you do? Staying with Fred, Slim?
Yes, he's staying with me for a while. That is, until he gets staked out on his own.
Well, it's mighty nice of you to help him out.
Oh, it isn't as if we were strangers. Say, what do you two have?
Forget about me, Fred. I'm not drinking.
Nor am I. You go right ahead and order.
Well, if you're sure you don't want anything. 2 specials, Clem.
Oliver told me about Mike.
Yes, that was a shame. Mike was one of the... Well, I guess you could call him one of the finest men here in Fort Munn.
I understand he drew his dust out of the bank a short time before he was murdered.
Yes, sir, he did. And I told him it was very unwise. You know how Mike was, headstrong. You couldn't tell him anything once he made up his mind. Do you think you'll catch the murderer, Sergeant? Everyone knows he was robbed, killed for his gold.
Sometimes takes quite a while to bring a killer to justice.
You've got a sizable job in your hands. Account of the snowstorm, there were no tracks. Ah, here come the drinks, Slim.
Here you are, gents.
There, that's it, Clem. I'll take care of it, Slim. Let's see.
It seems as if the cafe's nearly empty. I guess you'll be getting back to the bank, Fred, huh?
Can't be away too long. There you are, Clem.
Would you mind if I look at that poke, Fred?
This poke?
Yes, I thought I saw some initials on it.
No. You imagine things, Sergeant. I've never had my initials on this.
Now, don't put it away, Fred. I asked to see it.
I'm not putting it away.
A gun.
I was reaching
Fred,
for it.
if it's your poke, let's see it.
It's not my poke.
That's what I thought.
Hey, no, Fred, you can't
Shut
do
up.
that.
So, I'll hand it to you. You noticed something I overlooked. I forgot about initials on that poke.
What's this all about?
It's all about how Mike was murdered, Oliver.
What?
Yes, murdered. You were right. He probably didn't go to the bank. He didn't get that far.
That's about as far as you'll get, Monty.
He couldn't have drawn out dust that wasn't there.
Go on. Let them hear how much you know about it. You won't live to tell anyone else.
Fred, please. I don't know nothing about this.
You stay where you are. Maybe you'd like to hear the sergeant tell his story of how I killed Mike Gallagher. And when he finishes, I can tell you what will happen.
I can't believe it.
I'll put this gun in my pocket, and you'll all walk in front of me out of here.
Then you'll be found like Mike was found.
You won't get away with it, Fred.
That's what you think.
We'll be seen leaving here with you.
And by the time you're found, I'll be well on my way to Skagway in a boat out of here. No, Monty, it's no use. You're taking orders from me.
That mutt.
All right, King, get aboard.
I'll get him myself.
Out of the way, Slim.
You ain't stopping me.
Slim! I got the gun. King knocked it right out of his hand.
Wait! This dog, get him away from me!
All right, King. All right, boy. Well, I'll put these handcuffs on you, Fred, just so you won't reach for a gun again.
Clem, I guess you'll have to carry Slim. That was a real shot you gave him, Sergeant. But I never saw anything like King. Talk about sixth sense.
Well, King's responsible for catching these murderers, Oliver. Slim must have been leaving Fort Munn this morning when he saw me breaking camp, getting ready to come through. He wanted to warn Fred, so he came back here. How King knew he was watching or what his intentions were, I don't know. But when we met Fred and Slim outside the cafe, he started growling.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that was when I began wondering. I wondered why Slim would warn Fred a policeman was headed this way, until I remembered Oliver saying he suspected Mike hadn't been to the bank. It would be simple enough for Fred to make it seem that Mike had drawn out his dust, when in reality he'd been stealing it.
And when you saw the initials on the poker...
I said I thought I saw some initials on it.
What? You mean there aren't any initials?
Well, you'll have to look to see. Fred wasn't sure either. He just knew he was carrying around Mike's poker gold, and his conscience did the rest.
Well, I'll be doggone.
Yes, King, the case is closed.
Did you enjoy that one? Challenge of the Yukon was a long-running radio series that began on Detroit's radio station, WXYZ. It began as a 15-minute serial airing locally from 1938 until 1947. Then it acquired the sponsor, Quaker Oats, and moved to ABC from 1947 to 1949. Then it was heard on the Mutual Broadcasting System from 1950 until its final broadcast on June 9th, 1955. Wasn't quite done yet, though, because it stayed on television until 1959. How about that? Are you ready for another story? This one is being brought to us by Gladys Goodies. Good treats for your dog to eat. They use all natural products with no sugar, preservatives, salts, or harmful ingredients. So check out their online store at GladysGoodies.com. That is GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our very own promo code, RONS, to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That is RONS. Thank you, Gladys.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have a short presentation written by Philip K. Dick. We've had stories by this author dating back to episode number 38, when we had the short story Beyond Lies the Wub. One of my favorites, and we've featured it more than a few times. In this short, Philip takes a humorous look at writers and their perceptions. Ask yourself this: what if we took everything that was said literally? Well, what you might have may go something like this.
It was quite by accident I discovered this incredible invasion of Earth by life forms from another planet. As yet, I haven't done anything about it. I can't think of anything to do. I wrote to the government, and they sent back a pamphlet on the repair and maintenance of frame houses. Anyhow, the whole thing is known. I'm not the first to discover it. Maybe it's even under control. I was sitting in my easy chair, idly turning the pages of a paperbacked book someone had left on the bus, when I came across the reference that first put me on the trail. For a moment, I didn't respond. It took some time for the full import to sink in. After I'd comprehended, it seemed odd I hadn't noticed it right away. The reference was clearly to a non-human species of incredible properties, not indigenous to Earth. A species, I hasten to point out, customarily masquerading as ordinary human beings. Their disguise, however, became transparent in the face of the following observations by the author. It was at once obvious the author knew everything, and was taking it in his stride. The line, and I tremble, remembering it even now, read, "His eyes slowly roved about the room." Vague chills assailed me. I tried to picture the eyes. Did they roll like dimes? The passage indicated not. They seemed to move through the air, not over the surface. Rather rapidly, apparently. No one in the story was surprised. That's what tipped me off. No sign of amazement at such an outrageous thing. Later, the matter was amplified. His eyes moved from person to person. There it was in a nutshell. The eyes had clearly come apart from the rest of him and were on their own. My heart pounded and my breath choked in my windpipe. I had stumbled on an accidental mention of a totally unfamiliar race. Obviously non-terrestrial. Yet, to the characters in the book, it was perfectly natural, which suggested they belonged to the same species. A slow suspicion burned in my mind. The author was taking it rather too easily in his stride. Evidently, he felt this was quite a usual thing. He made absolutely no attempt to conceal this knowledge. The story continued. Presently, his eyes fastened on Julia. Julia, being a lady, had at least the breeding to feel indignant. She is described as blushing and knitting her brows angrily. At this, I sighed with relief. They weren't all non-terrestrials. The narrative continues. Slowly, calmly, his eyes examined every inch of her. Great Scott! But here the girl turned and stomped off, and the matter ended. I lay back in my chair, gasping with horror. My wife and family regarded me in wonder. "What's wrong, dear?" my wife asked. I couldn't tell her. Knowledge like this was too much for the ordinary run-of-the-mill person. I had to keep it to myself. "Nothing," I gasped. I leaped up, snatched the book, and hurried out of the room. In the garage, I continued reading. There was more. Trembling, I read the next revealing passage. He put his arm around Julia. Presently, she asked him if he would remove his arm. He immediately did so, with a smile. It's not said what was done with the arm after the fellow had removed it. Maybe it was left standing upright in the corner. Maybe it was thrown away. I don't care. In any case, the full meaning was there, staring me right in the face. Here was a race of creatures capable of removing portions of their anatomy at will. Eyes, arms, and maybe more. Without batting an eyelash. My knowledge of biology came in handy at this point. Obviously, they were simple beings, unicellular, some sort of primitive, single-celled things. Beings no more developed than starfish. Starfish can do the same thing, you know. I read on and came to this incredible revelation, tossed off coolly by the author without the faintest tremor. Outside the movie theater, we split up. Part of us went inside, part over to the cafe for dinner. Binary fission, obviously. Splitting in half and forming two entities. Probably each lower half went to the cafe, it being farther, and the upper halves to the movies. I read on, hands shaking. I had really stumbled onto something here. My mind reeled as I made out this passage. I'm afraid there's no doubt about it. Poor Bibney has lost his head again. Which was followed by, and Bob says he has utterly no guts. Yet Bibney got around as well as the next person. The next person, however, was just as strange. He was soon described as totally lacking in brains. There was no doubt of the thing in the next passage. Julia, whom I'd had thought to be the one normal person, reveals herself as also being an alien life form, similar to the rest. Quite deliberately, Julia had given her heart to the young man. It didn't relate what the final disposition of the organ was, but I didn't really care. It was evident Julia had gone right on living in her usual manner, like all the others in the book, without heart, arms, eyes, brains, viscera, dividing up in two when the occasion demanded, without a qualm. Thereupon she gave him her hand. I sickened. The rascal now had her hand as well as her heart. I shudder to think what he's done with them by this time. He took her arm. Not content to wait, he had started dismantling her on his own. Flushing crimson, I slammed the book shut and leapt to my feet, but not in time to escape one last reference to those carefree bits of anatomy whose travels had originally thrown me on the track. Her eyes followed him all the way down the road and across the meadow. I rushed from the garage and back inside the warm house, as if the accursed thing were following me. My wife and children were playing Monopoly in the kitchen. I joined them and played with frantic fervor. brow feverish, teeth chattering. I had had enough of the thing. I wanted to hear no more about it. Let them come on. Let them invade Earth. I don't want to get mixed up in it. I have absolutely no stomach for it.
That story was titled The Eyes Have It, and it was read for us by Greg Marguerite. It was first published in the magazine Science Fiction Stories, March of 1953. I love the creativity of it. It actually takes a couple of listens to grasp everything. After all, we can read a story that has been read to us, and we can even read it while being in the reeds, wearing red.
What are you talking about?
Just take that in for a moment.
This is the Edsel. Its classic vertical grille, its elegant lines promise superb performance. And the Edsel keeps that promise on the road. These high-compression, high-torque engines are just one of many things that make driving an Edsel a great experience. To shift while both hands stay at the wheel. To feel the solid sureness of this beautifully engineered automobile. To sensibly test the potential of the newest engines in the world is something no man should miss. Your Edsel dealer invites you to take the Edsel for an introductory drive. This week, Road Test, the new member of the Ford family of fine cars, the Edsel, at your Edsel dealer.
Use Ajax, the foaming cleanser. Clean pots and pans, just like a whiz.
Ajax cuts grease faster than any other leading cleanser.
Use the pain, the elbow tax, when you start cleaning with Ajax.
Ajax really polishes as it cleans.
So use Ajax, the foaming cleanser. Flush the dirt right down the drain.
My gosh, they're right. Foaming action Ajax makes even the dirtiest pan shine like new in a jiffy.
So use Ajax.
That was episode number 542, and I need to thank Hancook 909, Alicia Johnsel, Austin Sherman Burke, Janine Grant, and Andrew Schmidt. You guys literally made the show today. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.
All of the vintage audio used in the podcast is believed to be in the public domain. Ron's Amazing Stories does not own the rights to any of the old-time radio used here. If you hold the rights to any of the shows played, please contact us immediately at ronsamazingstories.com.